Hi everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Paratalk. And on this episode, this is kind of a request episode because had a few messages over the recent months from people asking, what books am I reading? You know, what am I reading? What's my thing? So I thought, well, I'm going to get Tom in and we're going to have a bit of a chat. And we're going to talk about the books that we enjoy and that we've read or we are reading. So without further ado, hello, Tom.
Hello.
Hello.
I'm glad you got me on for this topic. It's one of my favourite things, talking about books.
Talking about books. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it.
So,
yeah.
Books. You're still an avid reader, yeah?
Yeah, well, I'm an avid collector. I don't get that much time to read them these days. I buy them faster than I read them, but yeah, I do read a lot.
Books are getting harder and harder to come by. And I don't mean that people don't make books anymore. You go out in the wild and you hunt around. Where I live anyway, there used to be lots of second-hand bookshops. And there's nothing better than going in a second-hand bookshop and having a rummage around and having a look what they got. And it's that smell. Have you noticed that smell in a second-hand bookshop?
Yeah. It's like the dusty shelves and the smell of the old pages. It's just something about the smell of a bookshop. I know exactly what you mean.
You can get lost in it and you can spend...
Yeah.
I think the longest I've ever been in a shop was about 2.5 hours, just constantly looking around for stuff. I must admit, I picked up a few good bargains where they're just selling them. They buy books in bulk, they put them up on the shelf, they mark them up, and you come in and buy them. And you go in there and you look and you find something, and you get a book you've been looking for a while, and you almost kind of get that kind of high, don't you?
Yeah, and there's something about the way a good bookshop to me is one where the shelves are so packed with books that they're just all higgledy-piggledy all over the place that you've really got to rummage through them to find anything good. I don't really like going in where it's all neatly organised and it's all in its categories. I like seeing, I like the hunt of looking through those books. And when you find that one that you've been looking for, or just find something like a little interesting treasure among the shelves of just chaotically, haphazardly piled books all over the place. I love all that. Yeah. You do get a high from finding the right thing through, in a situation like that.
You always get that kind of bin as well, where you got all the books that have got like the torn cover, or some kids drawn like stickmen in it, or someone's used it as doing a speech, and they've underlined certain paragraphs that they're gonna talk about or whatever. And you always get like the library books that have never been returned. And they end up in a second-hand bookshop 10 years later. Is what got you into sort of books and reading, and also the more sort of paranormal stuff? What got you into that?
As far as getting started with books, I can't remember. I've always loved reading since I was a kid, and my parents always encouraged it. I can really remember the book fairs coming around. Did you have them at your school? They come round and you can just sort of, you get a little catalogue and you can order what book you want, and then they come in and you pick them up. Yeah, I think that was a really big thing for me getting into reading, was getting to just sort of picking something for yourself and getting to own it, rather than going to the library and just renting something for a few days. I really loved that.
I remember going to one of those book fairs and I saw a book, and it was the Book of Ghosts. And it was a kind of hybrid book, because it wasn't really a magazine and it wasn't really a hardback book. It was A4 size, and it always had all that crazy artwork on the front, like all hand drawn. And you would read through it, and all the pictures inside were impressions. They were illustrations, like paintings of, the headless horseman of the certain bridge or whatever. And then there would be like a huge text, and it would be written out, a couple of paragraphs about this haunting. And I remember buying one of those books, and it cost me, I don't know, 95 pence, something like that, back in the olden days, when we had old money. So that was my pride and joy. I took that book home, and I read it from cover to cover, and I wasn't very old. I was I don't know, 7, 8 years old, but that was kind of that. Made an impression on me. It was kind of like you said, you owned it. I mean, Did you do that thing as well where you open the book and put your name and address in it?
Yeah,
Did you do that?
I used to I've still got some of my books from when I was a kid, and I used to like doodle all over the pages and all sorts of stuff, like change like whole sentences, cross them out and write something else in, or put little jokes in the margins and stuff. Yeah, I used to really vandalize my books, but that's because I liked them so much. It wasn't because I was like disrespecting them. It was because they were mine, and I wanted to like change it, make it my own sort of thing.
Did you have a library at your school?
We had a little time. It was basically just a room and just another classroom that had turned into a library at our primary school. I didn't really spend a lot of time in there, to be honest, but I used to be a member of the a local library. I used to like going down there, and looking through all the books.
Yeah.
That was more my thing than the school library wasn't really up to much, to be honest.
I was quite fortunate because we had quite a good school library, although a lot of the books in the library were school orientated. We did have a section on mysteries. I remember borrowing a book from there, and it was about Stonehenge. Had Avebury in there, and stone circles and stuff. I remember that, but I also remember, as you say, going to the main, the town library. Unfortunately, now it's no longer a library; it's a block of flats. So people live in there now. But back in the olden days, it was a library where you could go in and you could hire books or lend books, and you could also rent out albums and cassettes. So downstairs, it was an old Victorian building, very, very, built in like 18 something, very grand, very high ceilings and grandiose staircases, kind of place you go in and go, it's definitely haunted, this has got a ghost in it, that's kind of that place. And I remember going in there as a kid, and they had this children's section, and on this children's section, they had, it wasn't called like Paranormal. It wasn't like that. It wasn't, because I was like I wouldn't have understood anything, but it was like they had a section with like ghost books, but they were all like children orientated ghost books, or monsters or that sort of stuff. And I spent ages in there, just sat in there looking at the books and looking at stuff. And that, to me, I would really enjoy that. And then of course I'd go upstairs and rent out the album Raiders of the Lost Ark soundtrack, because you could do that. It was great. I couldn't afford, I wasn't old enough to go and see the film, or whatever, or I wasn't able to go to the picture somewhere, so I'd get the soundtrack, and I'd listen to the soundtrack and imagine what the film might be like from the soundtrack. I used to do that, but that's just me as a kid being a bit weird. I remember getting the Empire Strikes Back score, the score for the film, back in like when did Empire come out? 81, wasn't it? Empire came out. Show my age now. And I got the soundtrack. I think I got the soundtrack before I saw the film, or something like that. Yeah. And I remember listening to the soundtrack, and in my head it was like, this film's going to be epic because the music's brilliant. So it's going to be and it was, of course, Empire's the best one, isn't it? Obviously, So it just, that's how my kiddie brain worked. But books and reading when I was younger. That's kind of how I got into sort of ghosts and reading about ghosts and the unexplained, and that was through the library and through, going to like, just book fairs. Well, I don't know if it was a book fair. It was more like with our school, it was more like this geezer and his wife came round, and they had a suitcase full of books, and they put it on a table. And it was like, that one's 5p, that one's 2p. It was like that. I don't know who this guy was, but I don't know where he got his books.
Just some dodgy bookseller.
Bookseller. I don't know. It's like the guy that comes round your house. Well, he doesn't come around your house, but he comes around the road that you live in his Ford Granada estate, and he's got a suitcase or a box full of hooky VHS tapes that he's taped off of, 50 pence for a week. You're not going to argue with that, are you? Right. But yeah, so, that kind of stuff was for me growing up. But when we get a bit older, I mean, like now, there are people out there that still read books, and there's lots of, the book reading community is still very strong. It's not like people don't read books anymore. We're going to talk about the books that we enjoy reading and we've read. And I'm going to start, each of us have got a little pile of books next to us. Tom's got a little pile and I've got a little pile. And first of all, I'm gonna hand this over to you. Grab one of your books and tell us about it.
Okay. All right. I just go and I'm just grabbing it random. Well, actually, it's just the one that's on top of the pile here. So, yeah, I collect. Like, I collect all books, really. Anything weird that I see in like a charity shop or a secondhand shop, I'll grab. But one of the main things I really like is collections of true ghost stories. So I've got absolutely, well, I wouldn't say hundreds, but I've got like shelves full of them. I'm running out of room for these. And I just wanted to pick like one of these books to talk about. And probably one of my favorites is called Ghosts Over Britain by Peter Moss. And he's compiled these stories. I don't know. I think sometimes it's all about how the author writes about the stories. You know what I mean? Like sometimes they write in a really dry way, and they kind of it's not too interesting. But there's something about the way he presents these stories. It seems like he's gone around the country, and he's picked like the stories he's picked are not the sort of typical ones you'll hear. You know, a lot of the time when you get these collections of ghost stories, they're either the same sort of famous ghost stories that you've heard 100 times before, or they're kind of like ones that take place in very grandiose settings. But it seems like he's picked ones that take place in like weird, you know, suburban residential estates, like random houses. He's just heard about a story and he's picked it up and wrote about it. And I just like the presentation of the book. It's the copy I've got is a nice hardback thing, and it's also accompanied by these amazing illustrations throughout that really set the scene. They're I don't know, I don't know how to describe them. They're like really nice hand drawn illustrations of the ghost stories, and some of them are really eerie looking.
What is the index?
The index of each story.
What has it got in there?
Oh God, it's got a long.
Have you got a favourite one in there?
There's one where, yeah. So you've got a section on historical hauntings and stuff, like the more famous ones, but then you've got like the family ghosts, and this is just ones where they're living with a ghost in their house. I can't remember the actual story. I'm trying to find it now. There's a good section on poltergeists and evil ghosts, with titles like The Shapeless Evil.
Sound of a film there. That's a BBC play, that is.
One of the best ones in here, just because of the illustrations, was I'm trying to find it in here because the illustration always jumps out at me as something creepy. And basically, there's a family in the house, and they they didn't have carpets, just had like plain like floorboards. Yeah. And then they ended up looking down through like a knot hole in one of the floorboards, and they saw an eyeball staring back up at them. And there's an illustration of that, and I really love it. But I'm trying to find it in the book now. I was trying to find it so I can remember the title of the story.
They looked down through the floorboards, and they saw an eyeball staring back at them.
Yeah, like someone was under the floorboards looking up at them.
I think it's time to move.
But the illustrations in this book are what makes it. I mean, the writing is good, but the illustrations really do add another element to it.
It helps you, doesn't it? It helps you sort of envision what the writer, the author, is trying to convey to you, doesn't it? And it sets a mood as well, doesn't it? What year was that produced?
The book was produced. Let me see now. Sometimes I get these books and they don't have some of the old books. They don't tell you when they were made. 1977.
Oh, classic era.
It's quite, that was a good era for ghost stories. Like 70 through like the 60s and 70s was when I think that was the best time for getting into like paranormal stories, and a lot of the books you find from them are really good.
It was still very fringe back then, very very fringe. Now not so much. Yeah,
but the story I've just found the story with the hole in the floor. Was from like 1952, and it's just from a semi-detached house in Pattingham, wherever that is. So yeah, it's like he's found quite obscure stories that I haven't heard in other places.
Yeah, those books are some of the best because the author goes out of his way not to just regurgitate and retell tales or some of the more famous cases, and they'll tell tales of accounts that maybe have never been documented, that just maybe in the family. You know, talk to old Uncle Derek. There was in the loft ghost, and then he'll go and interview him and get the story. I've got a few of those. Come under like folklore and stuff, but still, they're classics.
Collections of ghost stories are my thing. So I had to, I could just talk about those sort of books for like 3 hours. So I just had to whittle it down to one from my collection, one of those like compilations of ghost stories that was my favorite, and that's probably it, I think.
I'm going to jump in there and talk about a book which is kind of would be maybe a companion to your book. It's actually signed by the author, David Bell. He's got his signature in it. With
best wishes, David Bell.
The name of it is Ghosts and Legends of Staffordshire and the Black Country. To give you a bit of a synopsis, it says, this is a catalogue of strange phenomenon and unexplained events, including the old lady who haunts the wards of a Hertfordshire hospital and the underground weeping in the sea around the desolate crater at Ford. So, like yours, it's lots of collections of different like stories or accounts and stuff. And what's good about this is there's a map inside. In the map, he's kind of listed all of the areas so that you can look and get an idea where he is and what he's talking about. This was published 1994. So at the tail end, I think, of the sort of, before the kind of paranormal kind of exploded, as it was getting a bit popular then, wasn't it? But this is this is a book, I don't know, it's very basic. It's not, how many pages is it? It's only like 120, 118, 120 pages. And there's an awful lot of stuff in here, because it's like not like massive writing or anything. It's a great book, and I really enjoy some of the stories in there. And it's great for when I'm doing research, because I go, oh, I need a story. And I'll look through this and go, oh yeah, there's one here in Endon, and it's a well-dressed pagan rite, and it's all about this stuff and a paganism ghost and all it. And I think, oh, this is great. This is what I want, something different. Like you just said, there's accounts in these books that are completely not really talked about in any other place. So that's one of my favourites. So I'm going to hand it back to you now.
Oh, okay. Let's have a look what I've got here on my collection. I've got such a big pile of books next to me. Okay, well, I'll talk about this one. This is, I think they've just made a film about this case, actually, and I've covered it in a video before. And I wish I'd read this book before I did my video, because I made some mistakes in my video. This is like one of the most comprehensive and entertaining books on this subject, and it's called Jeff, The Strange Tale of an Extra Special Talking Mongoose by Christopher Josiffe.
Yeah.
For some reason, when I saw this book, like I'd seen it online, and I looked at the cover of it, and it's got a nice cover. It's like sort of hand drawn, and the font looks kind of whimsical. From the cover, it makes it almost look like it's quite a basic book, but it's a thick tome, and it's so detailed. But also at the same time, it's really entertaining the way he covers this case, Jeff the Talking Mongoose. Yeah, I'm guessing most people know about this case, but it happened in the Isle of Man. There was a remote farmhouse where apparently the family started to. It's basically like a poltergeist case, but it's the family started hearing strange noises, and then it sort of developed a voice, and then it revealed itself to be a mongoose that couldn't die, that lived forever, and it
said he was 300 years old.
Super intelligent. Yeah,
he came from India.
All these experts came to the house to try and debunk it, and a lot of them, some of them left a bit skeptical. A lot of them left quite convinced that Jeff existed. No one ever really saw him, but you now and then you'd see like a flash of something, or a hand come out from behind a wall. But yeah, it's just an interesting case. Whether it's real or not, I don't know. I'm still not sure after reading the book. Like, if you want to learn about this case, then this book is just he's really like thrown himself into the research in he just goes into so much detail in the book. But like I say, it's a thick book, but it's also entertaining. It's not like a really dry, like boring account. You know what I mean? Well worth a look.
Yeah, it's a fascinating case. Gareth and I, a long time ago, we did an episode on it. I'm sure we did, or we talked about it at some length. And it is a fascinating case, and I've read books with it in there. I've read poltergeist books that talk about. See, that's the one thing. Some people say Jeff, some people say Geff.
Yeah, I always said Geff. Yeah, but then I heard someone else say it was supposed to be Jeff, but I don't know. It looks like Geff to me.
It's kind of a classic case. It's up there with the Enfield poltergeist. It's up there with that.
Yeah.
For the media attention and for investigators going out there and trying to research it. But as we say, there are some pictures as well. There's a picture allegedly that the girl took of Geff on a fence on the island, and some people say no, that's just a fur hat. And it's highly disputed. Unfortunately, the farmhouse is no longer there. Well, the foundations are, but it was demolished, and there's just grass there now, and you can see a little bit of the foundation and a little bit of the wall. But so maybe is there any paranormal phenomenon there still? Who knows? But Geff kind of disappeared, and when said he was going away and never came back. So if I'm not wrong, I think Simon Pegg has just done a movie.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
He's a researcher and he has to go and investigate it. I haven't seen it either, so yeah, I will watch it though, because I think it's more of a it's more of a sort of a dark comedy, isn't it?
My friends watched it and he said he was he's not a big Simon Pegg fan, so he thought he wasn't going to enjoy it, but he said it was actually good. So and I like Simon Pegg, so I think I might watch it. I'll probably enjoy that.
Okay, so moving on, I'm going to up gears a little bit, and I'm going to grab a book. Okay, I just grabbed this one by random. And actually, I bought this book, right? I bought this book on a whim because somebody told me on the internet.
You should buy it and read it because it's got someone in it you know.
And I'm like, oh, okay. So I went onto eBay, onto one of these shops that, resell books. And I got it for like, I don't know, $1.99, something like that. I certainly didn't pay £7 for it, £8. I paid like $1.99 for it. It's like pre-owned. For those that want to know what it's all about, it's Will Storr versus the Supernatural. One man's search for the truth about ghosts.
Yeah, I've read this a long time ago, and I remember enjoying it.
It is really well. Will Storr is a journalist, and he's worked for a lot of those kind of magazines and stuff. So he knows how to write, and he knows how to put you in the picture. And it starts off telling a little bit about who he is and what he does and why he's doing this book, because he has some experiences and he wants to say, well, what is this thing? What is the paranormal? Let's find out about it. So he makes it a project, and a book project, to go and talk to people and see what it's all about. The book takes you through his journey of going and seeing all these people. I didn't know this at the time, but I'm reading the book, and when did this come out? I think it came out in, let's have a quick look. Well, 2006, 2007. So, yeah. A fair few years ago, but at the height of the paranormal, the most haunted, and everybody's, a ghost hunter.
Yeah.
So there's one, let's see if I can find it. No, I can't. I'm quickly looking and I can't. I'm not going to spend hours and hours looking for this massive index. But anyway, there is a chapter in this book where he goes and visits a ghost investigator, or some call, demonologist, or whatever you want to call them. And it only turns out to be the late Lou Gentili, which I was friends with for a number of years when he was doing his Lou Gentili show way back in the early days of way back in the early 2000s. He goes over and sees him and does a little bit of chapter on him, and it's fascinating to read somebody else's impressions of somebody that you've had contact with and you've spoken with, and it's very interesting. And he also goes on investigations with people, and he also visits people who are having phenomenon happen in their homes. And you can see that halfway through this book, the guy's getting really confused as to what the hell's going on here. Are these people tricking me? Am I being, am I willfully believing stuff that I'm being told? Because he's trying to be, he's trying to be very critical about it, and let's be logical about what I'm seeing and what I'm experiencing. I can really recommend this book for someone that just wants to read a book that's not going to be not going to mar you down in paranormal speak. If you want a good read and you want it to be a little bit light-hearted, because it is light-hearted as well, this is an amazing book. And of course, we're going to list all these books in the show notes anyway, so you can go through and go and look on eBay, and you can pick these books up now, literally for a couple of quid, because they're quite old. But yeah, Will Storr versus the Supernatural. It's great, and I really enjoyed this book. Like you, I found this book a fun read, and lots of interesting cases. Great book.
I seem to remember that Will Storr one. He's kind of skeptical, but he's kind of like, he's open-minded to these things throughout the book. That's what I remember. So I'm going to pick a slightly similar theme, I guess. It's called Paranormality: Why We See What Isn't There, by Professor Richard Wiseman. And this is a book where it's basically like a psychology book. He talks about the paranormal in the sense of like, why we might hallucinate something, why, from a skeptical point of view. And he explains like quirks of the human brain, as why we might experience paranormal things from a skeptical point of view. But what I like about it is, I get the impression from reading the book that he never fully discounts the reality of the paranormal. He never seems like he's sort of mocking the existence of the paranormal or completely dismissing it. He always seems like he's open to the possibility. He's just talking about why we might hallucinate something like a ghost, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we are hallucinating. It might the existence of a ghost might really be there, but he just sort of, I don't know. I like that approach to skepticism, because I think it's important if you're researching into paranormal things is to be skeptical and understand why like these things could happen from a skeptical point of view, but also not be so close-minded that you instantly just dismiss everything as being like a trick of the mind or something like that. So I really like this book. I think he's got a really good attitude towards things, and it's just really it's also like the way he presents things is really like it's good for easy digestion. You know what I mean? It's not a heavy psychological tome. He's very like he writes from a very accessible way. He writes in small little chapters. It's easy to take in, and it's well presented. It's easy to understand for someone like me who's not a psychology major or whatever. It's a good book.
Professor Wiseman was on a lot of ghost shows a lot back in the day. I'd say the mid-2000s, but the most haunted era. And a lot of people didn't like him because he was very, as you say, he was very kind of logical, and he'd always look to, and as I say, you should look for the most logical reason that something might be happening. And unless it's, something that's right in front of you that cannot be disputed. If you hear something or experience something, you got to think, well, maybe that's me. Maybe I'm fallible. So yeah, a lot of people didn't like him.
Was that Richard Wiseman? I remember they used to have like a skeptic on there every week who would say,
"Oh, are you on about Most Haunted?" That was Kieran O'Keefe.
There was a few different skeptics on there. I don't remember Richard Wiseman being on it, but
no, he was. He would be on different paranormal shows, and he would give his opinion on something, and he would sort of give you the logical explanation of what it could possibly be. But there were people out there that didn't like that, and I think it's refreshing to get books that are a little bit more logical, because to give you a different perspective on what the phenomenon might be. So there aren't that many of those books around, really, in the area of the paranormal. A lot of people will happily write about ghosts and poltergeists and talk about the phenomenon and in the context of, oh, it was Granny, or it was, the ghost of Derek that came back, or whatever.
Yeah. I like skepticism as a topic because I find it interesting. Like, any research, I like to look at like both sides of a thing. But I find a lot of skeptic arguments to be a bit like, sometimes it's like they don't analyze their own arguments as much as they analyze like the paranormal phenomena, if that makes sense. For example, like I recently did a video about like famous ghost photos, and I was looking at the Newby Hall ghost. It's like, the one with like the monk stood on, and I was looking through like for like people discussing it and the skeptical explanations for why it might be a fake, and some of the explanations people were coming up with really seem to be reaching. And I'm not saying that I fully believe the picture is definitely of a ghost, but people were saying it's actually a water stain on the photograph combined with the reflection of the light off a pillar behind, creating the illusion. And they were going into so much detail about how this was what the photo was showing. It was just like, well, that does not make any sense as an explanation. But because it was the skeptical answer, people were like, right, yeah, that's a good enough explanation. That debunks it. Consider that photo debunked now. It seems like a lot of time I get frustrated with skeptics because they seem to jump at what the first explanation that seems to debunk something and then consider it completely debunked and end of story, doesn't need discussion anymore. And sometimes the explanations just seem a bit more far-fetched than the paranormal explanation to me. So I just find like this book in particular is refreshing because it's skeptical, but also skeptical without being cynical, maybe is the best way of saying it. He's keeping an open mind throughout, it seems.
Yeah, and that's the way that you should approach anything that is not explainable in a way that we can explain it in our everyday lives. And unfortunately, if someone's going to say, oh, well, that was that, and then firstly you have to ask that person, what research have you done on the topic? What books have you read? How have you educated yourself to come to that conclusion? And they're like, well, I don't need to because I know. Well, how do you know? Yeah. And I think that people get angry then because you're kind of like, you're going up against them and giving them a poke. And I think people don't like that. And I always believe that you should always look at something with a dose of skepticism because you can trick yourself. There is phenomenon out there that really cannot be explained and we don't know why it happens. And whether it's Grandad come back to have a walk around, or it's something far more than that we just haven't got a clue. We cannot grasp it. And it brings me into actually one of my favourite books. And I bought this book on a whim because I liked the cover. And I was already a fan of the late, great Peter Underwood anyway. And if people don't know who Peter Underwood was, from the first line for over 30 years, in his position as the President and Chief Investigator of the Ghost Club of Great Britain, Peter Underwood has been actively involved in the undertaking of night vigils and carrying out research into ghosts and the paranormal in controlled scientific conditions. In this unique volume of largely unpublished accounts of nocturnal investigations, he guides us through a chilling tour of the most haunted houses in Great Britain. And it really is that. It's quite a read. It's nearly 400 pages, but it's got loads of accounts in here of his personal investigations into haunted properties. And these houses are manor houses, churches, private homes, and the phenomenon that he's experienced while in them. And one of the great things is Peter Underwood was never someone that would outright say ghosts are ghosts. He never indirectly saw a ghost flitter in front of him. He saw things and saw stuff and experienced stuff, but he was always at the point where, what did I see? I'm not sure what I saw. So yeah, he had a really fascinating outlook on the paranormal, and he's one of my favourite authors, and I think I've got nearly all of his books, and I've read all of his books on the paranormal. He wrote on other topics as well, but because he was an investigator, he had a unique ability to put into words what he'd experienced. So yeah, Nights in Haunted Houses by Peter Underwood.
That sounds good. I think I've got a few Peter Underwood books. I can't remember which one.
You should read this. You should get a copy of this and read it because it's brilliant. And I bought it on a whim because I thought, oh, I like Peter Underwood. I've read some of his articles. I, heard him on the radio. He's sadly passed away now. But I heard him on the radio. He had a radio program and did interviews. And I started buying his books, and I saw this one. And, because that's what I love. I love reading about investigations. And I love reading about them when they go into so much detail, when they talk to the people and, get their accounts and stuff. I love all that. I love all that stuff because it really sets the mood and it sets you there. So yeah, that's another one of my favourite.
Cool. Yeah. Looking on my shelf to see what Pete Underwood books I've got, because the name really I'm sure I've got some, but I can't see any. I'm sure I've got a few of his books though. He's quite prolific, isn't he?
Yeah. I mean, he's got lots of books out there, but I've got them all, and I've got some. Well, I'd say I've got the majority of them are actual books, but I've also got some as well on my Kindle. But we'll talk a little bit about that later. But anyway, your next book.
Okay, well, I guess I'll stay with the topic of staying in haunted houses. This is an absolute classic. It's called This House is Haunted by Lyon Playfair.
Brilliant.
An investigation into the Enfield poltergeist. So yeah, one of my favourite cases. Again, it's similar to that Jeff the Talking Mongoose book, but it's sort of more legit, even because he's actually been into the house and stayed there and witnessed the events himself. So, it's just a really good breakdown of the case. The Enfield poltergeist is a case that's just always fascinated me. I always found it really sinister, the whole story of it. And this book, I was trying to get my hands on it for ages. And because I buy things off eBay, and sometimes I just click on things without really looking. Like, oh, that's cheap, I'll buy it. There's actually another book with the exact same title, and I've ended up buying that book before buying because the actual book of This House is Haunted is quite rare. It's quite expensive. Yeah. So I saw like a cheap version of it. All right, buy that, and I ended up with some like fictional book called This House is Haunted. But eventually I ended up finding like a cheap copy on eBay. I don't know why it was cheap, because it's not in bad condition. I think it's just because someone's like written on the inside, like where the price is. It's got like writing inside saying like to Dad, Happy Father's Day, and then someone scribbled out the price and wrote nosy above it. But I actually quite like that about books. I like secondhand books because you kind of sense that other people have loved them before you have. You know what I mean? So I don't mind getting a book that's a bit battered and a bit, it's got writing and stuff in there, as long as you can read it. But I just love the book. It's again, it's not written in a boring way. It's really entertaining, and it's got photographs in there that you don't see. You don't see him, like when you're looking up the Enfield poltergeist online, you see the same photographs over and over. This has got some like interesting things in there of like bent cutlery and just weird things that they found, like strange objects that the ghost was throwing, and it's got pictures of like some banknotes that were found burnt up. It just gives you some extra detail that you don't find when you're just looking online at these cases. I always find it's better to get a book on a subject and read through that than to rely on online information. So yeah, I really like this book.
It's a good read. I've got the hardback copy. Picked it up a number of years ago, and it is quite difficult to get a good copy now, and it's like anything, it all goes up in price. But what I like about the book is that, now I will say, I mean, we obviously mentioned Guy Lyndon Playfair is there, and also Maurice Grosse is there, lead investigator. Mr. E-Type himself, he was up there. He's anyone in the paranormal will know who he is, especially in England. And he had a bit of a hard time with this case, because a lot of people tried to put him down, saying, you're making a lot of this up. You want to believe, and we do know that a number of years earlier that Maurice lost his daughter in I think it was a motorcycle accident, and everybody was saying, well, he wants an answer. He wants to believe because he wants his daughter to know that his daughter has survived and that she's still around somewhere. But there are so many people in that case that witnessed phenomenon, from police to the media.
Yeah.
I think even the Ed and Lorraine Warren came over, didn't they? Who showed their faces.
Briefly, yeah. I don't think they were there long.
But everybody sort of got involved with that case, and I do think I do think that Janet and her siblings, I do think they took the mick a bit, and I do think that as the case was going on, and like all poltergeist phenomenon, you get the start of it, you get the peak, and then it tails off to nothing. And I think that as it was quietening down, the children were like, we don't want this to stop. It's attention. All kids love attention.
Yeah.
And I do think that maybe they did add to it a little bit to keep it alive. And people tend to look at that as a negative. They like, well, clearly they made it all up. Well, I don't think they did.
Yeah.
I think that when it started, it started, and what they were experiencing was real. But what the great thing about the book, as you say, you get all of the detail, you get all of the notes and everything, so it's great. It's a great read.
You even get that where they've caught the girls making things up. He even admits that. It says the girls were faking some of the phenomena. They were doing it because they thought it was funny some of the time. It's like it freely admits that, but it also lists so many times where things happened where they couldn't possibly. Like there's one where I think it was the neighbor or an uncle came round and he was sat on a sofa and he got flipped up out of the chair. It was as if the whole sofa like flipped over, and it's like, well, how could two little girls do that? It's impossible. But
the next door neighbours who had some phenomenon happen to them, and mainly noise and stuff, but banging on the walls and stuff. The husband went round one evening and he witnessed furniture moving, and he said it scared him to death. He could see furniture moving around the front room, and no one was anywhere near it. And he said it scared him. He was scared. So this is a grown man.
Police officer even
got Lego in. Got bits of Lego thrown at them from just appearing. So it's a fascinating case, and it's one of many, because there are many of those kind of poltergeist cases out there. But the interesting tie-in with this case is apparently we got,
old Bill, who died downstairs in the chair of a brain hemorrhage.
And he was the one that was manifesting through Janet and doing all the stuff, whether that's true or not.
Yeah, apparently, yeah. Well, you never know, do you? Because if it's some kind of demonic presence, it could just be, picking up on this Bill energy and using it to pretend to be him or something like that. You never know with these cases whether it's a spirit, as they say, like in the traditional way of thinking of a ghost, or whether it's something else. It's the idea that it could be all a manifestation of the mind. I'm sure I've talked about this many times, but I'm still open to that idea that there's no actual spirit involved, but it's just something to do with the mind of it always seems to revolve around like a teenager in the family, doesn't it? Quite often, it seems to be like adolescence brings it on, and and some people have said that it could be something to do with the mental turmoil of adolescence is somehow manifesting these strange things happening in the house. So. I'm open to the idea that there's not even a spirit at all, that it's all just somehow manifesting from the psyche of a person. But I don't know. That's the thing about these cases. There's always so many like contradictions and different ways of looking at these stories that I find them like, I don't know, I find them like turning over in my head a lot after I've finished reading about them. They're just sort of like, the fact that like some of the phenomena is faked and some of it couldn't possibly have been faked, and just all these like weird like contradictions that you find through the stories and different twists and turns. It's just, I don't know. I find poltergeist stories endlessly fascinating, and this is one of the best ones. I think one of the most interesting ones for me. You could say that if it is a spirit or some kind of demonic presence or something like that, that it's sort of feeding off the energy of the person. It's like itself to that person, and it's using that sort of whatever it is, the adolescent turmoil, to sort of manifest themselves in a way. You know, it's feeding off them as in an energy. I don't know. Again, it's impossible to tell really. I think with these cases, but like what the reason behind them is. But that's one of the things that makes me want to research them. Really, that's one of the things that interests me in the cases is the sort of unknowable nature of them.
We're going to move away from the ghosts a minute. We're going to come back to ghosts though.
Okay.
We're going to move away a minute because I want to talk about aliens and UFOs, and I want to talk about one book that made such an impression on me, and even to this day, I still fondly think of it as the book that really sort of made me start to read more and more about the UFO phenomenon. Even though I had an interest in it when I was younger, I didn't really read a lot of literature. I didn't go out there and get mainly ghosts I was into, but I was into UFOs as well, but not as much. So the book I'm talking about is Whitley Strieber's Communion. And I didn't read it at the time when it came out. I was a bit too young, but years later I did. It was after I'd seen the film. So I saw the film first, back when it came out all those years ago, and then that prompted me to get the book, get a copy of the book, because everybody was saying, "Oh no, yeah, the film's good, but you know, Christopher Walken and that did a really good job, but you need to get the book, you need to read the book." And there's at this time, that was the front cover of Communion was, the picture was
it's a classic,
yeah, a
isn't
classic.
It? Yeah.
And
yeah.
Whitley Strieber, who obviously he's had his own lot of controversy because he is a fiction writer. People would say, "Oh, he's just writing another book just to make money." But when you read the book, you've got to read the book to understand that what was happening to him. If anyone out there doesn't know anything about Communion, which I'll be very surprised, but I'm just going to give you, I'm not going to do no spoilers. I'm just going to give you an overview of what the book is about. Okay, Whitley Strieber, he experiences what we call today the abduction phenomenon. Okay, and he has these visitations, and they go beyond something in the bedroom. They go beyond that. He has a cabin in the woods, which he goes there with his late wife now, but at the time his wife, and friends, and he would stay there, and he had stuff happen there as well. And not only him had stuff happen, his friends witnessed phenomenon as well. And it wasn't just in the cabin, it was around the woods as well, where he would meet beings, things. I don't know. You'd have to read the book to, for him to explain it to you. And so that prompted him to write 2 other books. There's like 3 books in the set, and I would say that if you're going to read Communion, to read all of them. They'll be listed. They'll be in the show notes, so I'll list them in the show notes. But yeah, so of course the 3 books go through the whole, the whole of his experience and him questioning himself, because honestly, he thought he was having a mental breakdown. He thought he was going insane by some of the phenomenon that he was experiencing. And one of the interesting things is, in his cabin in the woods, it was plagued by what we would call a poltergeist phenomenon. Things were moving around and things were going missing. And he felt like he was being watched. He felt like something was in the room watching him. Creepy stuff. But the book, I couldn't put it down, Tom. You've read Communion?
I have not read them. I've watched some podcasts with what's his name, Whitley Strieber.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've watched some.
You should read it.
Yeah. He seems like an interesting guy, and it's kind of one of those books that's always been on my list of things to read, because it is a classic, isn't it? But I've never got round to it now.
Yeah, I agree. Read it, and anyone out there that's listening, if you can get a copy and read it, because it's totally fascinating. Your next book, Tom.
Well, actually, this might tie in somewhat. It doesn't really, but what you were saying there about him, Whitley Strieber, experiencing aliens and then poltergeist activity, it's sort of like, I don't know, a thing that I've been sort of working on is, actually, I'll just tell you about the book first, because this kind of change. This is a good book for sort of changing your perception on things. I think it's called The Holographic Universe by Michael Talbot.
Yes, Michael Talbot.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's been a while since I read it, so forgive me if I'm getting this wrong. But it's the premise of it is that there's, we think of the physical world interacting with the mind in sort of like a one-way direction, really. We exist in the physical world and we perceive the world through our senses, and it goes into our mind, and then we think about it, and our thoughts are just our thoughts in our head. But this sort of presents the human mind in a different way, in that we have much more of we sort of manifest reality around ourselves. So our mindset can sort of change our very reality. He sort of presents the mind going outwards and creating the physical world around us rather than it going the other way. It's just an interesting book. He goes through all these different cases, and he sets out his ideas in the book. Some of the science in the book, I think, is a bit like, he goes into like some of the quantum physics. I think some of that's a bit dodgy. Like sometimes if you look into it, some of his conclusions are a bit wrong. Like I wouldn't take everything in the book as like gospel, but it's just I think it's just a good way. It's just a good way to get the brain thinking differently about the nature of reality, and like the way the mind can manifest reality for you. Like I don't know if I fully believe that we just create our own like pocket reality around ourselves based on what we're thinking. I think it might be more of like a back and forth interaction. The reality exists and we take it in, but also we sort of manifest it back outwards again in some like back and forth way. But what you were saying about the in a paranormal sense, a sort of theory that I've been kind of coming more and more around to is that the idea that like a lot of paranormal phenomena is sort of based on our thoughts and our perception of things. And I'm sure I've spoken about this many times, but like what you were saying about the Communion book, how he was experiencing sort of alien abduction phenomena, but at the same time poltergeist phenomena. Yeah. And I've noticed in a lot of stories very similar things. Like you'll experience, say, like people will see lights in the sky, and then they'll see a cryptid of some sort. Or they'll see lights and then they'll experience poltergeist phenomena, or they'll see a dog man in the woods, and then later that night they'll see a human ghostly figure walk through their bedroom. And it seems like these phenomena are sort of all linked together in some way. And I don't know, this book sort of gave me the idea that we could be sort of influencing these things in some way. These could be manifestations of our mind going outwards and creating like a physical reality out there. I don't think I've really got the idea fully formed in my head yet. I don't know if I can explain it very well, but just the idea that there's much more interaction with the world through our minds than how we think of reality, really.
I think you're on the right track there. I've read up on this stuff, and I've read a lot of books on it, and I'm like you. I have my own thoughts on what we might be experiencing. The problem I have is if it's an individual thing, okay. If it's me and everything that I perceive and everything that I understand, I'm able to manipulate to the nanosecond. As I walk into a room, that room is there. I perceive that room as I want to perceive it. So I am creating that room in a way. Does that mean that all the individuals around me, I'm influencing them and creating what they do as well? Okay.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's why I say I think it's much more of a back and forth. It's not just one pocket reality with your brain just creating everything around you. And I think it's much more a back and forth thing. There's physical reality, but also it's sort of like an interaction between our brains and the physical reality, which you could be in. Because the same thing with paranormal, when multiple people see the same thing, is it a manifestation of all those people's minds, or is it, I don't know, but I don't think it is just the fact that I think this is sort of what the conclusion of this book comes to, is almost like we are just in our own like little universe that we create ourselves, but I don't see how that works with everybody's individual minds at the same time.
I think it's more of a collective thing. I think it's more of as a social, as people, as a collection of people, everyone. I think the consciousness out there that we put out into the universe, that's what influences our perception of reality. Our vision is, very limited. As if something's got the ability to pop out of our spectrum of vision, we no longer see it. It's still there. It's still there, but we don't see it. We no longer perceive it. If it can move to a dimension that we can't perceive it to us, it's magic. It's vanished, but it's still there. So I think that we, as a group, as people, our thoughts and our beliefs and all that stuff go a long way to creating the reality that we live in. Path A or path B or whatever you want to do. But when you have a group of people that all sort of think similar, then I think that you do, in a way, you all play a role in kind of perceiving the group reality that you live or experience.
Yeah.
But it does move on quite interestingly to the next book that I want to talk about.
Okay.
Because that has a lot to do with reality. Some of you might be familiar with the author Anthony Peake, who talks a lot on life after death. I remember coming across Anthony Peake's work a long time ago. A long time ago on YouTube, when he was doing a small little talk in a bookstore. I don't know where it was, but it was before he'd released his first major book, Is There Life After Death? It's quite a big book as well. It's over 400 pages, or nearly 400, but it's a lot. But this book, it's entitled The Extraordinary Science of What Happens When We Die. I'm going to sort of tear it down to the most basic way that I can describe the book, because the book has got some really far out theories in there. But what Anthony Peake does, he tries to look at the science behind it and see if the science kind of adds up to what he's talking about. So you have to be prepared to do a little bit of head work, but it is a good book. So basically, what if when we expire, right, when we die, whatever you want to call it, rather than us going on to some other netherworld, or there's nothing or whatever, is that we reset and we start to live our life again. So everything resets at the point of conception. Our life is reset, ready to go again, and we live our whole life again. Okay, but it's not the same life. It's a different life, because along the way you're going to make different choices and have different thoughts and different, you might have a different job or different people that you're with and stuff. You don't relive it with everyone, and so your life is slightly different, but you're reliving the same, moments in time as a whole. One of the things he talks about is deja vu, and the deja vu experience, where you're somewhere and you go, "Cool, I feel like I've been here before." Well, in his explanation in the book, it's, well, you have been here before, but the reason that you're thinking this is because you've actually lived this moment before in a previous, iteration of your life. And of course, all this is happening, right? All this is happening in the last few moments of life of your previous life. So think of it like the Next Generation episode, where the captain of the Enterprise, Jean-Luc Picard, gets an injury, and as he's unconscious for a few hours, he lives a whole life in a different place on a different planet, and he dies an old man, and he wakes up from his coma or whatever it was. I don't remember the full story, but that kind of thing where because obviously at the moment of point of death, you slip out of time. So then time becomes meaningless. So that your 1,000 years there's no moment, there's no time. You don't measure it. It takes as long as it takes. So it's a fascinating book, but it is a very you've got to sit down and read it. As some of the books I've got, you can just read and go, oh, that was fun. But this one's, you got to get your head around it, and you got to really sort of read what he's writing. He writes very sort of precisely, and he does get the point across.
Is it like he definitely thinks that that's what?
No. He's not saying that this is what actually is. He's saying that if you look at all the data out there, then this is a possible. This is a possibility. This could happen, but this isn't the only book. He's written a myriad of books since this book on the subject. He's got Cheating the Ferryman, stuff like that. He's got lots of books out there. But I bought this one because I've always had an interest in afterlife, death, communication, all that sort of stuff. And I thought, he's talking about it from a slightly different angle where it kind of, look, put it this way, right? This is the kind of book, right, that you would pick up and it's not got nothing about heaven in it. It's got nothing about angels. It's got nothing about that we're going to grow up, you're going to die and go to a place where you're going to have your dream house and all your family's going to be there. No, it's not. It's not. What it's saying is that when you die, you just simply keep on living again, and you're just going around in a complete circle. As you do it, you're learning new stuff, and and it's kind of, you could have lived a million times before, and some people might have not have lived before. It might be their first run. Basically, it's an interesting twist to reincarnation. It is interesting. It's an interesting book.
It's almost like multiverse theory, isn't it? Like if people are going around living the same lives over and over, but it's like a different life each time, it would suggest that almost like there was these different multi-universes that people were living in. Put it this way,
right? And this is all right. I'm reaching now, but I'm just going to give this as an example. Imagine this, right? That you are at home and the phone rings, okay? And you think, that's Jack. And you pick the phone up and it's Jack, right? And you go, that's weird. Yeah. I'm just thinking about you. And the phone rang and I knew it was you. And he's like, it's just coincidence. Maybe it's not. Maybe that moment has happened before. And at that moment, you pick up on a previous life memory. And it all that moment has happened exactly at the right time. So, but what that's telling me as well, if moments like that are, connected, that means that those other people are reliving their lives on the same stream as you are. It starts to get weird.
Yeah. Yeah, but like, what happens, for example, in that scenario we just suggested there, the guy sitting there waiting for his phone to ring, he dies at like the age of 50, and Jack goes on to live till he's 80, and they both go back around again. But like, what's happening whilst, like, do they go back to the same sort of timeline, or do they sort of both go back and restart a completely different branch of a timeline?
You're in the realms of quantum theory and stuff now.
Yeah,
you're in the realms of how does that work, or is it simply ESP? Am I once again, it's still connected to the global consciousness, where you are you connected in some way to know that a moment's going to happen? And if so, if there is a global consciousness, then if everybody thought about the same thing at the same time, could we manifest something into reality?
Yeah. I think that was what I was trying to get at before with the mind manifesting thing. It's Who knows? Maybe you've manifested Jack giving you a phone call. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe he is a figment of my imagination, and he never even existed. maybe I created him and gave him the life. I don't know. But I do like reading stuff like this because I might not agree with all of it, but I do find it fascinating. I really do.
Yeah.
I would like to get Anthony Peake on an episode of Paratalk, but I think he's far too busy for that at the moment. I think he's writing another book at the moment, I think. But he's a fascinating bloke, and he comes up with lots of interesting theories. And like I say, don't shout people down. Listen to what they got to say. You might not agree with them, but you just hear what they got to say.
Yeah, definitely.
What's your next book, Tom?
Oh, well, I'm looking at my pile of books and thinking, I don't know about this one. Well, it's a bit out there. This isn't really, we're taking a bit of a swerve here, but it's called Sacred and Herbal Healing Beers.
Okay.
By Stephen Harold Buhner. It's a bit of a swerve from what we've been talking about, but it's I don't know. It is in my pile, and I've got to talk about it at some point. It's one of my favorite books. It's basically, he goes into the history of fermentation, but he talks about it from like a spiritual point of view. In that a lot of religions have this sacred connection to fermented products, beer, wine. If you think of like Jesus and the wine being his blood, and there's all these different religions around the world which have this connection to fermented liquids and some sort of holy connection to them. But he goes into that, and then it's just a really interesting book. And then he goes into all these different, because over the years it hasn't just been like hops that have been added to beer. It's been all sorts of different strange plants, and he goes into the sacred nature of the plants that they would add to beer and the supposed properties that they would impart on the beer. So a lot of the time these drinks were like, they weren't just for drinking and having a party. They were like these, they were either medicine or they were some kind of spiritual practice. There's all these weird like recipes in there so you can actually make your own. And he even goes into like hallucinogenic beers that they used to make, like they used to add henbane to beer back in the day. I'm sure, I could be wrong here. I'm sure the original recipe for Pilsner called for henbane to be added, which is quite a poisonous plant, but it's also, in the right dose can be like hallucinogenic and can give you all kind of strange effects. So he's got a recipe in here for making your own henbane ale, which if you got it wrong might kill you. I don't know, but it's just an interesting book. It's got a lot of recipes in here, but also just like a lot of history and a lot of information about just fermentation and the sacred nature of it. I don't know why this hasn't got anything to do with what we've been talking about really, but I had to bring it up at some point just because I really, really love this book.
Well, alcoholic drinks or medicinal drinks, the flowers in the woods and stuff. It's kind of like you were in the olden days. You were someone with a little bit of power if you knew what flowers to use to, Uncle Jack's got a bad back. Give him a dandelion and a dock leaf and some in some, make a beer from it, and he'll be fine. So knowing stuff like that was a thing back then, and it was lots of as you say, drinks were used in rituals. They still are now, but more so back then because rituals were more of a thing back then. Drinks and that do play a part in I suppose in the mystical world. I think that that's fascinating. I don't know about the hallucinating, making a beer that makes you hallucinate. That's interesting, but it has a warning on it, may cause death.
Well, it might do. I don't know. I mean, it does warn you. It's just he's given recipes, and also it's mostly just an interesting book to learn about. Well, it's got a lot of stuff about different culture. You get to learn about like interesting cultures, interesting fermentation process, which was something I never really thought I would find interesting, but it somehow makes it interesting. And also like Just you get to learn a little bit of like the sacred nature of various plants, and just a little bit of like herbalism in there. It's just a book it's just an interesting read. It's something that's like I've never had much of an interest in brewing my own beer, but I just picked it up one day. I thought, oh, this looks interesting. Sounds weird. It's a weird title for a book, Sacred Herbal Healing Beers, and it's fascinating. So I had to throw that in there just because it's an interesting book.
So I think on that note, I think we've come to the end of this episode. So what's I was going to ask you before we depart. How's the gaming going? I haven't seen any new gaming videos from you lately. What's going on there, Tom?
Oh, I've been ill. I've had an infection. I don't know what it is, kidney infection or something. I've been on antibiotics, but I've been laid up for about a week ill, so I haven't had much chance to record anything or do any streaming or anything. The last time I streamed, I was playing Dark Souls, and I was playing so badly because I was getting this illness. And then that night, I was like having fever dreams that I was in Dark Souls in like the catacombs level, just this, when you have those fever dreams where it's just like repeating in your head. It was like that, but I was in the game, and then after that, I haven't really done any streaming since then because I was too ill.
I had a dream like that when I was sick. I woke up, and I woke up from a dream, and I still felt that I was in the dream for a moment. It was really weird, and I was completely sweating. And I don't know, it was like a horror dream. It was like I was in this house and I was trying to get out. And I woke up, go to the bathroom, and I got up and I felt like I was in the house. It was really weird. I was kind of confused. But and then I don't like that when you're that sick and you have those weird kind of dreams. I get those sometimes. Yeah.
I'm on the mend now, but I'm on some like antibiotics that make me like, I don't know, like my mind, I feel like really fuzzy in my head. So apologies to your viewers if I sounded a bit scatterbrained, but
didn't notice it.
It's tablets that I'm on.
Some of those tablets do have weird side effects, don't they? Make you feel a bit off sometimes. But hopefully you'll be back on track soon with some new content. But anyway, so thanks for joining me. Anyway, Tom, it was a fun conversation, and I hope that everybody that wanted to hear about our interesting books can now go out and buy all the books we talked about, because they're all amazing. They're all brilliant books.
Yeah.
I'll add them to the show notes so that everyone can go and be eBay or wherever you need to go, or even go on Kindle and download it. I don't
know. Kindle, yeah.
I'm sure they'll be on there as well. But so remember to give us a like and a subscription or whatever, or wherever you or a review, wherever you might be downloading this episode. And until next episode, see you soon. Thanks for listening.